coffee in hand. Good, because today's story, let's just say it's about the kind of family love that comes with conditions. Stick around, there's a twist waiting for you at the end, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of justice too. Emily Carter tapped her phone screen with a quiet sigh, confirming a $1,000 transfer to her parents. Joint account payment complete. Same as every month, on time, no questions asked. She glanced at the electric bill lying on the kitchen counter, then at the sunlight filtering through the small window above the sink. It wasn't even her bill. She didn't leave lights on unnecessarily, she barely used hot water, but she paid it, along with a dozen other household expenses that slowly, quietly had become her responsibility. At just 22 years old, Emily had taken on the role of the unofficial head of household, financially anyway. While most of her college classmates were still searching for jobs, she had secured one during her junior year, thanks to a successful summer internship. Soft Tech Solutions offered her a full-time developer position before she even graduated. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, steady income, benefits, a solid beginning. She could have moved out right after graduation. She had the savings for it. She had even toured a few apartments near her office. But then one night at dinner, her mother's voice cracked slightly as she said, "Emily, your dad and I were hoping you might stay with us a bit longer, just until things even out." Her father, sitting beside her, looked down into his plate and added, "Things have been rough lately. Our medical bills are piling up, and groceries, utilities, they're getting harder to manage." Emily didn't even hesitate. "How much do you need?" "1,000 a month would help keep things afloat," her dad said, almost apologetically. That was the beginning. From that day forward, she took on the burden without protest. Every month she contributed $11,000 to the household, while barely spending on herself. Her clothes were practical, her meals simple. She didn't go out much, didn't splurge on tech or fashion like her peers. Instead, she focused on work, both her job at Soft Tech and something else, something private. After dinner, while her parents watched TV in the living room, Emily would retreat to her bedroom, shut the door, and fire up her laptop. But she wasn't gaming or browsing the internet. She was writing code, quietly, methodically. She was developing her own app, a smart home security system that would combine real-time monitoring, intelligent alerts, and a sleek, intuitive interface. It wasn't just a passion project, it was her dream. No one in the house really understood what she was doing. They thought she was wasting time. On more than one occasion, she'd overheard them whispering things like, "She's always on that computer. No wonder she doesn't have a boyfriend." But Emily didn't care. She didn't need validation. She wasn't looking for approval or attention. She was building something that could change her life, and until then she'd keep her head down, do her part, and pay the bills. No one seemed to notice she was covering. Emily had grown used to being invisible in her own home. Her parents still asked if she wanted another helping of food, or reminded her to bring a coat when it was cold out. But when it came to acknowledging her accomplishments, her efforts, or the quiet sacrifices she made every month, there was only silence. And then there was Samantha. Her older sister had always been the spotlight stealer, the one who sparkled a little too hard at family events, and always found a way to make every conversation about herself. 7 years older, married to her college sweetheart Andrew, and the mother of a high-energy 7-year-old named Liam, Samantha carried herself like a celebrity trapped in a middle-class life. She wasn't wealthy, not by any stretch, but you'd never know that by the way she acted. Designer handbags, fresh manicures every week, Instagram stories showing off casual brunches at overpriced cafes. She and Andrew rented a luxury apartment on the more expensive side of town, drove cars they couldn't afford, and dressed Liam in boutique clothing. On the surface, it all looked polished and perfect, but Emily knew better, because behind the filters and brand names was a different story, one that showed up on Emily's phone screen at least once a month. "Hey Samantha's voice would chirp over the line, "Sugary sweet, do you think you could spot me like $150 just until next week? Andrew's paycheck got delayed and I really need to pick up this coat before it sells out. It's a limited drop and you know how fast those go." Or, "Can you send me $200? Liam's birthday party is coming up and I want it to be magical. Don't worry, I'll pay you back next Friday." Next Friday never came. Emily had stopped expecting repayment a long time ago. She would quietly send the money, then watch as Samantha posted selfies in a new jacket, sipping wine at rooftop bars, tagging brands and restaurants like she was an influencer. She never acknowledged the help, never said thank you publicly, and certainly never offered to return the money. It was maddening, the entitlement, the arrogance, the way Samantha treated borrowing money like it was part of Emily's job as her younger sister, and all the while she acted like she was the one doing Emily a favor just by being related to her. You really need to start doing something with your hair, Samantha said during a Sunday dinner, her perfectly lined lips curling in disapproval. Honestly, it's giving high school science fair. You're not still using that $20 drugstore shampoo, are you? Emily didn't respond, she just focused on her plate while Samantha scrolled through her phone and added, "You should really look into laser facials. I have a friend who does them for cheap. Well, cheap for me, you might want to save up." She said it with a smile. Smile as if she were being helpful. What made it worse was the way their parents seemed to fall for it all, mistaking Samantha's curated image for competence. To them, Samantha was stylish and sociable, while Emily was quiet and obsessed with her computer. They didn't see the late nights Emily spent coding. They didn't ask about the app she was building, or the steady praise she received from her manager at work. They didn't understand or even try to understand what Emily was working toward. Instead, they made passive comments like, "You should get out more," or "maybe if you dressed up a little you'd meet someone." And yet, when Samantha needed help, Emily was the one they quietly turned to. No one ever asked Samantha to pitch in for groceries, even though her boutique job gave her enough free time to get her nails done twice a week. No one questioned why Andrew never contributed to the household bills. But Emily could be relied on always. She had become the invisible engine that kept everything running, quiet, unseen, and constantly taken for granted. But as Samantha's requests for money became more frequent, and her attitude more smug, Emily began to wonder just how long she could keep being the responsible one in a house where responsibility meant nothing, and appearances meant everything. Everything seemed to settle into an uneasy routine until that Tuesday. That's when the storm came crashing in. Emily had just gotten home from work, when she noticed something strange: too many cars in the driveway, the front door propped open with a box. She stepped inside and froze. The living room looked like a storage unit. Boxes were stacked everywhere, suitcases lined the hallway, and random furniture leaned against the walls. Samantha was in the middle of it all, hands on hips, directing their parents like she was managing a moving company. "What's going on?" Emily asked, dropping her keys, still in her work blazer. Samantha barely looked at her. "Oh, didn't Mom tell you we're moving in just for a little while?" Andrew appeared from down the hall, looking nothing like his usual smug self. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoulders slumped. "He lost his job," Samantha announced before he could speak. "Some ridiculous financial scandal. His own friends stabbed him in the back." Emily looked at Andrew. "What happened?" Andrew avoided her eyes. Samantha jumped in again. "He borrowed some company money. He was going to pay it back. But his so-called friend found out during an audit and flipped out. Can you believe the betrayal?" "You mean he was stealing?" Emily asked carefully. The room went silent. Her parents exchanged awkward glances. "That's a horrible thing to say," Samantha snapped. "Real friends understand when you're in a tight spot." Emily wanted to push back, but what was the point? Logic was never welcome in Samantha's world. That night, their parents announced that Samantha, Andrew, and Liam would be staying, just until they get back on their feet. Emily nodded, biting her tongue, pretending she didn't already know this would be a disaster. It didn't take long. Samantha quickly made herself at home, but not in a grateful guest kind of way, more like a queen reclaiming her castle. She criticized everything. "This kitchen is a disaster," she scoffed one morning as she left dirty dishes in the sink. "How do people live like this?" She never lifted a finger to help clean but had no problem barking orders. "Mom, can you mop the floors?" And "Emily, seriously, you need to go through your closet. I tossed a few of your old shirts. They were just taking up space." Emily stared at her. "You threw out my clothes. They were ugly. You should thank me." And yet, every time Samantha or Andrew needed something, money for Liam's school supplies, a dentist appointment, gas for their car, they came to Emily. "Hey Samantha said sweetly one night, popping into her room without knocking. "Could you spot us $300, just until Andrew gets his next check? We want to take Liam to the aquarium this weekend. He's been feeling down." Emily hesitated. "Oh come on," Samantha added, folding her arms. "You're single, no rent, no kids, you have money." Emily said nothing, pulled out her phone and transferred the money again, but the tension in her chest grew heavier each time. One evening, after another exhausting day at work, Emily walked in to find the entire family gathered in the living room. The energy felt off. Her mom smiled nervously. "Emily, can you sit down for a minute? We need to talk." She sat. Her dad cleared his throat. "With 5 adults and a child in the house, the bills have gone up a lot, especially the utilities and groceries." "What your father means," her mom added, "is that we were hoping you could contribute a bit more. The $1,000 you've been giving us, it's just not enough anymore." Emily blinked. "How much more?" "Maybe $2,000 a month," her dad suggested, almost whispering. Her eyes widened. 20-year single, honey, her mom said gently. No dependents, you can afford it. Emily looked around the room. Samantha was pretending to scroll through her phone, trying and failing to hide her smirk. Andrew avoided her gaze completely. Her parents looked hopeful, expectant. And what are Samantha and Andrew contributing? Emily asked. Silence. Well, her mother began. They're going through a difficult time right now. Now we're all going through a difficult time, Emily muttered. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake them all awake, but instead she nodded. Fine, starting this month, because that's what she did. She held everything together while everyone else fell apart. But inside her, something was cracking, small fractures from years of being overlooked, dismissed, and used, and sooner or later, it was all going to shatter. Everything had settled into an uneasy routine, tense, uncomfortable, but manageable. Emily told herself she could endure it. She had endured worse. She had always been the quiet one, the steady one, the one who didn't make waves. Emily's shift had run late that day. Her mind was buzzing with code and deadlines as she pulled into the driveway, hoping for a quiet dinner and maybe, just maybe, a moment of peace. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. Boxes, her belongings, her books, clothes, toiletries, even the worn childhood stuffed bear she kept tucked in her closet, were all stacked in the hallway like trash waiting for pickup. Heart pounding, she dropped her bag and rushed down the hallway toward her bedroom, or what used to be her bedroom. The walls that once held her framed certificates and photos were now plastered with colorful cartoon posters. Her desk was gone, replaced by a tiny plastic table covered in crayons and superhero action figures. On her old bed, now wrapped in a kid's comforter, Liam sat playing a video game. Aunt Emily, he said cheerfully, not looking up, check out my new room. Before Emily could respond, Samantha appeared in the doorway behind her, holding a shopping bag and sipping iced coffee, like nothing was out of the ordinary. Oh, you're home, she said flatly. Emily turned to face her, jaw clenched. What is going on? We moved Liam into your room, Samantha replied with a shrug. He needs more space for his toys and homework. His old room is basically a closet. And where am I supposed to sleep? Emily asked, voice low, trembling. Their mother appeared behind Samantha, wringing her hands nervously. Emily, sweetie, we thought since you're hardly ever home, always working or on that computer, you wouldn't mind using this sofa for a while. Emily blinked. So you moved all of my things without asking me and gave away my room. You would have made a fuss if we asked, Samantha said, completely unapologetic and seriously. It's just a room, you're being a little dramatic. Emily stared at her in disbelief. A little dramatic. Something in her snapped. All this time I've said nothing, Emily began, her voice shaking, but not from weak, from holding back too long. I've paid the bills, kept my head down, swallowed every insult, but this is too far. Oh come on, Samantha scoffed, it's not like we threw you out on the street. No, Emily said, voice firming, you just took over my space, treated me like I didn't matter, and didn't even bother to warn me. I'm not a stranger in this house, I'm your daughter, your sister. Her mother looked pained. Emily, don't turn this into a big deal, we're family, sometimes we make sacrifices for one another. Emily laughed, bitter and soft. Funny how I'm always the one sacrificing. I gave you money without questions. I never complained. I stepped aside so you could all feel comfortable in this house, and you repaid me by tossing my life into the hallway like it meant nothing. Samantha rolled her eyes. God, Emily, don't be so sensitive. You act like the world owes you something. Emily turned toward her sister, voice suddenly quiet. Dangerous, you've been pushing me for months, Samantha. I kept my mouth shut while you took money, space, respect, and the more I stayed silent, the more invisible I became to you. There was a pause, just long enough to feel the weight of what had been said. For the first time, Samantha didn't have a snappy comeback, and for the first time, Emily didn't feel small. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay on the living room sofa, her new bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the fridge in the background, her mind spinning. The ache in her chest wasn't just from the physical discomfort of sleeping in a common space, surrounded by noise and judgment. It was from the weight of everything she had swallowed for too long. She rose quietly before dawn, while the rest of the house slept soundly in rooms she was no longer welcome in. Emily sat at the kitchen table and made 2 phone calls, one to a moving company, the other to her boss to request a day off. At 7 a.m. sharp, a truck pulled into the driveway. The sound of boots on the porch and the rustling of boxes startled the household awake. Emily stood by the front door, calm, composed, directing the movers with quiet precision, box by box. The pieces of her life were loaded into the truck. No drama, no raised voice, just efficient, deliberate movement. Samantha stumbled into the hallway in a silk robe, eyes wide. What the hell is going on? I'm moving out, Emily replied simply. You're what? Her parents came rushing from the kitchen, both looking confused and half-dressed. You can't just leave like this, her mother gasped. We haven't even talked. We've talked, Emily interrupted, you just haven't listened. Her father frowned. Emily, sweetheart, where will you go? You don't have a place. I do, she said, looking him in the eyes. I bought an apartment. I closed on it 2 weeks ago. Samantha scoffed. Right, sure you did. Emily turned to the movers. Take the rest from the hallway. As they moved past, her mother whispered, but what about the bills, the groceries, the house needs you. Emily gave a sad, almost kind smile. I'm not your ATM anymore. This room, this house, none of it feels like mine. For a long moment no one said a word, then Samantha, arms crossed, snapped, seriously, you're just going to abandon us after everything we've done for you? Emily stared at her, voice calm but laced with steel. What exactly have you done for me, Samantha? You criticize me, take from me, throw away my things, hijack my space, and not once have you said thank you. One of the movers appeared at the door. Miss, we're ready. Emily grabbed her bag. I'll be back next week, not to move in, just to talk, and with that she walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence of the people who had never truly seen her. The new apartment was quiet, bright, clean, hers. The moment she stepped inside, Emily felt something inside her shift. Not relief exactly, more like clarity. She placed a mug on the kitchen counter, looked out the window at the city, and for the first time in years exhaled. She kept her phone off for the next several days. The messages came anyway, missed calls, voicemails, some concerned, some angry, a few laced with guilt tripping. Emily didn't respond. Exactly 1 week later she pulled into her parents' driveway. The curtains twitched. Someone had been watching. Before she could even knock, the front door flew open and her mom pulled her into a tight hug. Oh, Emily, thank God, I was afraid you'd never come back. I'm not back, Emily said firmly, I came to talk. They sat in the living room, Emily on one side, her parents and Samantha on the other. Andrew hovered awkwardly in the hallway, avoiding eye contact. Her father cleared his throat. We've been thinking about what you said. Your room is still yours. Ethan moved back into his old one. I didn't make the dressing room, Samantha added quickly as if trying to clean her slate. I can manage with the closet in my room. Emily nodded but didn't smile. I appreciate that, but I'm happy where I am. Her mother leaned in. We dismiss you, sweetheart. It's not the same without you. We need you, her father added gently. Emily raised an eyebrow. You need me or you need my money? No one answered. She continued, just to be clear, I'm not moving back. I'm not sending $2,000 a month. I'm not supporting this house, while being treated like an afterthought. But how did you even buy a place? Samantha blurted. You're just a junior developer. You've barely been working a year. Emily took a deep breath. I sold the security app, one built, the one you all thought was a waste of time. My boss bought it for $500,000. I own part of the royalties too. The room fell silent. Her mother turned pale. Her father blinked, as if trying to process the number. Andrew slowly sat down and Samantha's jaw dropped. You had $500,000 and never said anything, she whispered. Emily's voice was even. I didn't tell anyone because I knew exactly what would happen. You'd find reasons why you deserve it more than me. You'd guilt me, pressure me, manipulate me. That money is mine. I earned it. So you're just walking away? Her mom asked, voice breaking from all of us. I'm walking toward myself, Emily said softly, and I'm done apologizing for that. She stood. I love you, but I won't be used, I won't be silenced, and I won't find a life that revolves around pretending. As she walked toward the door, no one stopped her, not this time. Only after the door shut behind her did the weight of departure truly settle. The silence was deafening. Her mother sank into the couch, eyes glassy. Her father rubbed his forehead, like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, and for the first time they turned on Samantha. You said she was fine with all this, her mom whispered. You said she didn't mind, her dad added, sharper now. Samantha stood frozen, suddenly alone in a house that wasn't so comfortable anymore. Emily, meanwhile, stepped into the elevator of her apartment building. As the doors closed, she looked at her reflection, tired, but standing tall, and allowed herself the smallest, most victorious smile. She had finally chosen herself, and it felt good. In the weeks following her final visit to her childhood home, the silence from her end had been absolute. She turned off message previews on her phone, muted family group chats, and stopped answering unknown numbers altogether. She needed space, not just physical but emotional, mental, spiritual, and for the first time in her life she chose herself without guilt. Her apartment quickly became more than a place to live. It became a sanctuary. There was no Samantha yelling down the hallway, no passive-aggressive comments over dinner, no tension hovering in the air like smoke, just light, quiet, and air that felt easier to breathe. Her saving things remained untouched, aside from modest furniture purchases and the occasional delivery dinner, when she felt like celebrating another quiet evening alone. Work had never been better. Her security app, now under Soft TK's umbrella, was a resounding success. It was being beta tested in upscale neighborhoods, praised for its intuitive interface and smart alert system. Every month, her royalty checks arrived without fail, and with them, a quiet reminder that she had done something that mattered, and she had done it all on her own. She started to live, really live, in a way she'd never allowed herself to before. Weekend trips out of town, a spontaneous flight to Seattle, a long-awaited hiking trip in Colorado. She wasn't reckless. Emily would never be reckless. But she let herself indulge just a little. She bought herself well-fitted clothes not for anyone else, but because they made her feel strong. She tried new restaurants, wandered through bookstores, even enrolled in a pottery class. And then there was Daniel, a software engineer she'd met during a tech networking event, funny, grounded, emotionally intelligent. He liked her because she listened deeply and thought before she spoke. He admired her independence, her drive. He never once made her feel like she had to prove anything. It wasn't love yet, but it felt like something good, something real. Meanwhile, back at her parents' house, things were unraveling. Without Emily's monthly support, the household budget collapsed almost overnight. Samantha and Andrew were forced to face a reality they had ignored for years. The credit cards dried up, bills piled in, the luxury apartment they used to rent, gone, their cars returned to the dealership under lease default terms. Now all 5 of them were crammed back into the old house. A house that felt smaller, heavier, without the money that once made it livable. Samantha picked up a part-time job waiting tables at a bistro downtown. She wore a visor and non-slip shoes, and came home with her once pristine nails chipped, and her once glamorous hair pulled back in a tired ponytail. Andrew worked nights, stocking shelves at a warehouse, often too exhausted to speak by the time he got home. Their days of designer handbags and weekly brunches were over. The closet that once overflowed with overpriced dresses was now a graveyard of gently used items, listed online for fast cash. Samantha was constantly arguing with buyers over $15 handbags she had once posted about on Instagram. Even Liam's toys were slowly being sold off, piece by piece, to cover electricity and internet bills. Through all of this, Emily remained silent. But the calls kept coming. At first they were masked in sweetness. Her mother would leave voicemail like, "Hi honey, just calling to say we miss you, hope you're doing well. If you happen to have a little extra this month, we're behind on the water bill." Then came the casual suggestions. "We were just thinking," her dad said in one voicemail, "you've got all that space in your new place and we're a bit crammed here. Maybe it wouldn't be so crazy if we, I don't know, moved in for a little while." Even Samantha tried. "I get it now," she texted one night, "I pushed too hard, but Liam misses you. Maybe we could come stay with you for a bit, just until things even out." Emily read every message. She responded to none. She had already said everything that needed to be said. She had drawn her boundary clearly and firmly. They had only listened when the money stopped flowing, and even then it wasn't about reconciliation, it was about access. And Emily, she was done being a gateway to comfort. She never got to enjoy herself. That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Emily stepped out onto her balcony with a glass of wine in hand. She watched the sky shift from warm gold to soft lavender, the breeze lifting the edges of her cardigan. Below, the city buzzed, honking cars, distant music, the soft chatter of evening life. But up here it was still peaceful. Daniel would be coming over later with takeout and a new board game to try, but for now it was just her, and the moment she took a long, slow sip of wine, eyes closing briefly as she breathed in the quiet. This right here was not just freedom, this was peace. At its heart, Emily's story is about self-worth, boundaries, and the quiet power of walking away. It reminds us that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and that love without respect becomes manipulation. For years, Emily gave everything, her money, her face, her silence. But the moment she chose herself, everything changed, not with revenge or rage, but with calm, steady action. The most powerful lesson: you don't have to prove your value to those who benefit from ignoring it. Sometimes, peace isn't something others give you, it's something you reclaim. Emily's journey teaches us that true freedom begins when we stop apologizing for outgrowing the roles we were forced into. And in choosing herself, she didn't just leave a toxic situation, she stepped into a life of purpose, dignity, and peace. We all deserve that moment, and we all have the right to say enough.